The one, the only Josh Ward with us on the Vol Report, brought to you by Zool Beer Company. And I'll tell you more about them. Please hit the like, subscribe, and share button. Tennessee is in the college football playoff hunt. I didn't see that coming. We'll see if Josh saw that coming. And it's all brought to you by Zool Beer Company. Great location downtown with parking. And you're going to love Zool Beer Company as far as a great place to watch the game or just a great place to hang out, meet people. A lot of good space there. You're going to love Zool Beer Company. Yeah, Josh, I remember back in August, we said to ourselves, I can't wait to visit in mid-October and talk about Tennessee pushing their way into the college football playoff. We were quite prophetic.
I do remember it being brought up with laughs like, oh, yeah, Tennessee will be 4-0, then 5-0. Then why not beat Alabama with game day in 10? Tennessee will be 6-0, and everybody will be talking about Tennessee, and then a ha, ha, ha. And here we are. And that is reality. And it's no laughing matter at this point. Nobody's laughing off the idea of Tennessee being able to play with anybody in the country. That includes Georgia coming up in a few weeks because this offense is so dynamic and seems unstoppable. And you always have to be careful saying that because then something can go wrong. But to this point, there's no, okay, could there be a curse? Could there be a jinx? How do we end up getting in the way of this happening? I don't think Tennessee fans have to worry about that anymore. They see a team that is confident, a team that is making plays causing the other team, including Alabama, to have to keep up. And it's a different world that Tennessee is living in compared to the last 15 years.
Yeah, and I remember the last run, and I don't want to get people too excited. Tennessee could still stub their toe against somebody along the way. They could lose to Georgia. They might not even be in Atlanta, which is their goal. So I don't want to get fans too incredibly excited. But I do look back at the 1998 national championship team, and it was very unexpected because Peyton Manning had left. I don't think anybody expected that team to win a championship, especially a national championship. However, being around, and I wonder if you remember this being younger than me, I remember the sense that Tennessee was going to at some point stumble and it was going to be a respectable season, but they weren't going to win a national title. This feels very different. It feels to me, Josh, like this Tennessee football team should make it when I look at their schedule, that there's a confidence level there within the team that I at this point, I would almost be surprised if they didn't make it through the season with just one or maybe just two losses. They're poised, unlike that 98 team, which sounds strange, I know.
Well, so I think the difference is at this point, there's still a huge hurdle, and that is Georgia.
Sure.
In 98, that was a team that you're right had to replace very key pieces from the 97 team led by Peyton Manning. But they were in the middle of a tremendous run of elite talent
Right.
and winning a lot of football games. There was that Florida hurdle. And when Tennessee got over Florida, the conversation that I recall did jump to, okay, well, can this happen? Saying a little bit longer for that to happen with Tennessee, but there wasn't a Georgia that is where it is now then. But that being said, Tennessee as a playoff team is still very possible, even with the loss. If Tennessee goes to Athens and loses the game, there's still a road to the playoff. You need some help from other conferences, but all those other teams remaining undefeated is going to be difficult for them too. And Ohio State and Michigan do have to play each other. And this offense is such a high level, and this quarterback play. A difference in that season, this season was, T. Martin was well thought of, but we hadn't seen him yet, right? He was in his first year as a starter. Hendon Hooker came into this season with a lot of hype and some outside Heisman conversation. Now that's very real too. Not only are we talking about Tennessee as a playoff contender, even more strongly, we're talking about Hendon Hooker as a Heisman contender, and that helps the profile of Tennessee. So the floor now has to be 10-2. Like if Tennessee finishes the regular season 10-2, based on the conversation right now, Tennessee fans will be disappointed because that means you lose to either Kentucky or South Carolina, right? So that would be a real letdown knowing the results after the Alabama win. But I think that's the floor, and I think 11-1 is the floor for a lot of Tennessee fans right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I don't think South Carolina really has a puncher's chance. I could be proven wrong. Kentucky is certainly scary, and with Georgia, I probably fumbled the exchange a little bit there. I I just felt like in '98 that team was going to slip up at some point. I did, and most of the media members that covered that team did. And I know you're younger than me, but this this team, it doesn't feel like they're going to fumble at any point. It doesn't feel like they're going to drop the ball. It still took a Clint Sterner fumble that we all know about in the Arkansas game. It just doesn't have that feeling that going to they're going to drop the ball on their end. Does that make sense? It felt that way in '98 that at some point it was going to fall apart.
Well, yeah, I guess I don't recall that. I don't recall that it was the feeling that it was going to fall apart for Tennessee in '98. I like this, but again, the Georgia thing is what's different to me because Tennessee's going to be a pretty big underdog in that game. Like a line's already out, and Tennessee's a 11-point underdog projected.
Oh, wow.
A couple weeks out for that game. So that to me is the difference is that Tennessee still gets to play the underdog role in this title hunt, and as the '98 season went along, Tennessee was a team that you still had some other teams you had to deal with, and you needed maybe some help there in that final weekend where a former Tennessee quarterback ends up helping you a little bit. But this team, the expectation I don't think is to get to the playoff. There's optimism for sure, but Tennessee's going to go to Georgia very confident, and fans are going to be very confident that week. But also realizing it would be an upset to go to Athens and win, at least as it's projected right now. To me, that's the difference.
That's fair. Vegas has Tennessee as a 20-1 odds of winning the national title. It was 151 before the preseason. Where does that stack up? I'll tell you that. It's all brought to you by Azul Beer Company, XULbeer.com for those listening on our audio versions. And Josh, you've tried out Azul Beer, award-winning craft beer, and a fantastic location. It is just it's got it all there. It's nice for Knoxville to have its own local brewery that's top notch.
Yeah, it's a really cool setup, as you've talked about, but different selections, different IPA selections. Love the Mexican lager, the seltzer. So different tastes, different flavors you're looking for. You find different options. They're all really good at Zool.
So to give people some perspective, Tennessee a 20-1 favorite to win the national title. And there you have Ohio State, which is a little better than a 2-1. So that gives people some perspective. That tells me that Vegas thinks that there's a really realistic shot that Tennessee could win it all. When you look at the at college football right now, I guess it's Ohio State, but who else out there, maybe other than Georgia, do you think that Tennessee might have trouble against?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with Georgia because you have to go through Athens, as we talked about, just to get to Atlanta. And while I said that if Tennessee doesn't go to Atlanta, it still has a real chance to get to the playoff, obviously it becomes more difficult, right? You need help. You need a case to be made on your behalf from others falling because you didn't even make your own conference championship game. That doesn't rule Tennessee out, though. We've seen other teams make it. And yeah, you might say, well, Alabama, they get more benefit of the doubt because of who they are. Maybe so, but I think Tennessee's branding and this offense and the quarterback play helps. You also need to stay competitive against Georgia. If Tennessee goes to Georgia and loses by 17 points, then that would really hurt the case. But obstacles, Georgia, Bama. Because if Tennessee does beat Georgia, Bama's going to be somebody you have to get through in the SEC title game. But Dave, if Tennessee's 12-0 and loses that title game, I would right now bet on them being in the playoff. I think 12-0 gets you in most likely because Ohio State and Michigan are gonna play. One of those teams will lose. They're both really good. Michigan is a program where Jim Harbaugh was being questioned going into last season, and I think he shut all that up. I don't know if they'll make the playoff, but they're really good again. Clemson, they have a chance to run the table in the ACC. I'm skeptical with UCLA. I'm skeptical with TCU, those type teams. So, yeah, I think the big name brands that you're used to talking about, those are the real obstacles for Tennessee to try to win a national title.
My favorite comic book growing up was What If? And it would be what if Uncle Ben didn't die in Spider-Man? And he would he be a bad guy because that influenced his life? There's an example. What if Ole Miss beats Alabama and Tennessee beats Georgia? That would be saucy in Atlanta, wouldn't it? If it was Ole Miss and Tennessee. What if Stan Lee of Marvel Comics presented? What if Josh Ward?
Well, I think Greg Sankey, who is all about making money, there's no doubt about that. I think he would be reaching out to mustard companies to see if they want to add on a sponsorship to the game. Why not? Because it'll be talked about all week long. Might as well profit off of it. So, yeah, it'd be incredible. We've been gifted many storylines in this business here, especially recently, and that could top them all. Honestly, if it were Tennessee Ole Miss, I'm very skeptical, but it's a what if scenario. So I didn't think Ole Miss would be as good as it is, and tougher tests are still to come. Obviously, that Alabama game, but you never know. So if we could get Heupel versus Kiffin 2 from last year, rematch from what happened in Neyland Stadium for the SEC title and for an automatic spot in the playoff, yeah, sign me up from a radio host standpoint for that one.
I'll tell you what, the reason I think it's so possible is when I look at that Alabama team, if you look at their skill position players, if they don't get a Jahmyr Gibbs as a transfer, where do they rank in skill position players? Middle of the pack of the SEC at best? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it from that standpoint, it makes me think it's possible. I agree with you. I think Alabama wins that game, but it's possible.
Yeah, I suppose so. To me, because Alabama continues to have mistakes that allow other teams opportunities, and Lane Kiffin's smart enough to figure out how to take advantage of that and uh, see if he can run against Alabama and put up enough points if his team's able to create a turnover or take advantage of penalties that continue to pop up for Alabama. That has to be corrected because yes, there's no group of, honestly. I mean, because they had such a collection altogether at one point, but uh, Ruggs and Waddle, they don't have a single Amari Cooper or who's the next man up, Calvin Ridley. They don't have that at the wide receiver position. They have a bunch of pretty talented guys and some younger guys that have big potential, but they don't have what they have had in elite wide receiver talent. There's no Devontae Smith who just absolutely terrifies opposing defensive coordinators. Gibbs is terrific. He is a special player, but he can only do so much at that position too. And they have Bryce Young, and to me that's the difference. He elevates what those receivers can be, and I think Leitu's is pretty good, but no, it's not what we've talked about with Alabama at that receiver position.
Hit that like, subscribe, and share button. The Vol Report with Josh Ward brought to you by Azul Beer Company, xulbeer.com. If you're listening to the audio version, worldwide award-winning craft beer, great location downtown. You're absolutely going to love it. And Josh, I think a scenario that could play out is quite probable or possible, and that is Tennessee could lose to Georgia. You mentioned they're the underdog. Georgia, Alabama in the SEC championship game. And then if Alabama were to beat Georgia, let's say Tennessee runs the rest of the table, could you potentially have three teams in the college football playoff? To me, that puts Tennessee in a very precarious position because I think most people in the room without Tennessee ties in that college football playoff committee would say, nah, it seems like a lot from one conference. What do you think?
I would say no chance. I know it's fun to bring up and talk about, but I just don't think there's any chance they would consider the third team from the SEC to make it. So two is still an ask. It's the SEC, but to get two in, you still need a little help from the other conferences. I don't see it as a possibility. So doesn't mean that three wouldn't be deserving based on the criteria of finding the three best teams for the playoff. I think they're going to consider other teams from other conferences too strongly for that. So, no, I think if you're asking to be the third team in, that is too big of an ask.
Hendon Hooker, as far as winning the Heisman Trophy, does it take a CJ Stroud stumble, or can Hendon Hooker and CJ Stroud both finish out the season as they have played and Hooker overcome him? That would include a win at Georgia.
Yeah, so I think Hendon can actually overcome CJ Stroud. What's interesting to me is I'm seeing a lot of people say right now if the award were given out that it would go to excuse me, it would go to Hendon Hooker. But the odds makers say otherwise. The odds makers say that it's CJ Stroud who is clearly in the lead. Hendon has made up some ground, but he has more ground to make up. But I think he can do that, and that Georgia game would be it. If Tennessee goes to Georgia and wins, they're doing that with Hendon Hooker having – a good performance, right? So if Tennessee in the SEC, is unbeaten and Hendon Hooker continues to do what he is offensively, that is just going to get a ton of attention. I think more people will start to pick up on the story of Hendon Hooker, how good of a person he is, what he's overcome, kind of being cast aside at Virginia Tech, cast aside for a brief period of time at Tennessee, hanging in there, becoming the starter, and then taking off. And then again, if the team is that good, I think that he would have a real chance. Guaranteed, I don't know, because CJ Stroud's numbers are just going to be terrific. They already are, and I think that'll continue. And if Ohio State's unbeaten, like if we have a 12-0 Tennessee, 12-0 Ohio State battle, I think it gets really interesting. But I think it's a little prisoner of the moment to say right now it would go to Hendon Hooker because the odds makers, they have some idea of where it would go. I think it would be CJ Stroud right now, but Hendon has absolutely changed that conversation, and he has a chance to continue to change it moving forward.
Well, I know the Heisman's tried to clean up too a little bit some of the old voters that don't watch as much as they used to, and maybe they're in a totally different profession nowadays. And some of the votes would come in early November. What? I mean, how are you placing your? So they tried to clean some of that up. I think that benefits Hooker against Stroud because I think some people would have just literally mailed it in 20 years ago and been done with it in early November. Whereas I think Hooker continues to play well in November, barring something that we don't know.
Yeah, he can really just pad some numbers if you go through the rest of that month in terms of what it could be. And if Hendon is really in it, not that that's their focus, but if he is really in it coming out of the Georgia game, well then that'll be added motivation. The offensive linemen will want to help Hendon get the Heisman. Those guys will be very excited. I mean, there could be other opportunities for other players in award season, All-America status, all that stuff, because Jalen Hyatt has entered that conversation very seriously for first-team All-American potential. And who knows? I mean, if he keeps throwing up huge numbers, Blitnikoff becomes a real possibility. So it's more than just Hendon, but that would be the top spot. And because of who he is and how much he would deserve it, I think people would want to back him and get him there. So I think it's very much up for grabs. And again, it's a team award because, if Reichardt's kick is good and Alabama wins the game, Dave, we're talking about Bryce Young having a Heisman-type performance at Neyland Stadium because Alabama would have won the game, and he was incredible. Like, if Jahmyr Gibbs catches that pass on second down and runs it in, you're talking about almost a 500-yard passing day. But you know what the result is? Tennessee won the game. So Tennessee wins. Hendon Hooker had a terrific performance himself, so he's vaulted in the Heisman conversation. So that Georgia game, not just for playoff, but for Heisman talk, could Hendon win it with a loss at Georgia? Yeah, I think he could. I don't like his chances nearly as much, though. That's how important I think that game could be.
Interesting. Okay, so I don't place as much on that one game. Let's assume he doesn't flop, okay, and throw 4 interceptions, which there's nothing in his track record that would indicate that. But let me ask you this. So if you had a bet a mortgage payment on Tennessee, not just in the college football playoff, but in the actual national championship game, win or lose, or Hendon Hooker wins the Heisman, you had to bet on one of those two things. Actually wins it, not just shows up. What would you bet on?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of copping out here, but I've got those odds, and the odds tell me it's better chance that he wins the Heisman than winning a national title because he can win the Heisman, then they still have to win more games, right, to go win a national title. So I would put that on. I would put my money on Hendon because I could also get a CJ Stroud injury, which I don't want, but if that happens, so to reiterate, like here's an example from last year, into the season. Remember the Bama Auburn game? Bama played terrible. They had a bad game.
Oh, yeah.
Came back to win. Bryce Young didn't have a very good day. But that same day, C.J. Stroud and Ohio State go down to Michigan. C.J. Stroud was the better player that day than Bryce Young. But Bryce Young's team came back and won. Ohio State lost. And Bryce Young went up. C.J. Stroud went down in the Heisman race based on the team's results. And Ohio State, if they went out and they're 12-0 and they've beaten Michigan and Tennessee's 11-1, Hendon may deserve it. That doesn't necessarily matter. So you have to keep that in mind when it comes to that award. But Hendon is the challenger right now. And I don't have to tell Tennessee fans that voters love a good challenger story. And it can become very real if Tennessee keeps winning and Hendon keeps putting up numbers. So Hendon versus Tennessee, I know the history of the award with the University of Tennessee. forget curses and forget all that. That's not a part of the conversation this season, I don't think, with Tennessee. So he has a real contender, but we are just halfway through. There is more work to be done, no doubt, for both, for a national title and, of course, the Heisman.
Oh, we didn't get ahead of ourselves at all, did we? I mean, you do put it in perspective when you say just halfway through.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
But most of the games have already been crossed off. I make this point a lot. I've said it this week on the radio that, the season is really, it's like a 7 to 9 game season because, we know what's going to happen with 3 non-conference games. At least in the narrative, we know what's going to happen with Vandy, with Missouri. So kind of check those off. Well, you're down to 7 games that you even talk about for 12 months out of the year. And you've already gone through Alabama, and you've already gone through Florida, and you've already gone to LSU and won, and you escaped at Pitt, and that's long gone, right, in conversation. So in terms of the checkoff games, David, there aren't that many left in the conversation. So need to be ready for Kentucky and don't dismiss South Carolina. But if Tennessee plays Tennessee football, that's where the Tennessee is Tennessee bad conversation. If Tennessee plays Tennessee football against South Carolina, Gamecocks don't have a chance in the game. And that's close to being the same against Kentucky. So that's how close this is to being a very real conversation for the Vols. And that's why you're seeing some skipping ahead, and we're guilty of it ourselves.
Yes, we are. Josh Ward of the Sports Animal, noon to 3 each and every day if you're in the Knoxville area, and they've got the app too, so check him out. The Vol Report brought to you by Xul Beer Company, xulbeer.com for our audio listeners. And we certainly love the fact that Xul Beer is a part of what we do. Again, it is worldwide award-winning craft beer, great location downtown with parking. You don't hear that a lot. He's Josh Ward. I'm Dave Hooker. This has been a presentation of Off the Hook Sports.